Hello, Chris Bennett here in Austin, and there's been some big changes in the last week since I launched this project, and I'm taking this opportunity to rephrase everything because the real need here is not donations and money. It's really partners and people who understand both the urgency of this situation in healthcare and also they can see a way forward, that some important ideas could have a big impact on the healthcare system and affect and benefit all of us. So it's really about working around the fact that we're all under a lot of stress. So, and money is not really the key need here. Let me repeat that. Success for this project is right around the corner, and so therefore certain amounts of money are really not the critical thing. I'm sure that's going to happen. The crowdfunding campaign is an idea for once we get millions or hundreds of thousands of views on this channel. So then small donations from large numbers of people could make a big impact on funding an organization. And the organization, the changes that my dad needs are going to come about within a short period of time as things are coming together. So I just want to take this opportunity. In the last week, I passed out a couple copies of my book to Del Bigtree and Jared Padalecki and his friends. So Jared was in a TV show called Supernatural, which I watched about half of the episodes. And in watching that show, you really can learn a lot about the critical problems of the world and why they're happening. And I'll get more to that later. But Jared has been highly committed to helping people with depression after he experienced a severe episode of depression out of the blue. And he shared about it. He was working on the TV show Supernatural, and certainly working huge numbers of hours. He was on the set, and just suddenly one day he had experience of total depression and crying and pain. I don't know how he would describe it, but those are some of the things that he said. But that's my own work over the last 20 years and working with my father is to identify and make available the understanding of the causes and cure of depression. And so from everything that I've seen and working on this for over 20 years, 30 years in total, but 20 years with my father, I found a way to identify and share the good news that the cure for depression is readily available to everybody. And so what I'm talking about is total eradication and cure across the entire 6 or 7 billion population, which, by the way, is totally possible if the knowledge of the cause and cure is spread. And knowledge can be spread very, very fast. Overnight, millions or billions within a short period of time can get a message. And we've seen that in certain music videos, Gangnam Style, Taylor Swift videos, music videos. So I'm optimistic, and I think you will become so too as you hear a little bit more. So the platform in which I recently launched just spontaneously over a couple weeks because my father was in the hospital and it was life-threatening, is on Indiegogo. But that's sort of like one possible pathway which is in development. And so the critical thing is, this is not about money. This is about viral spread through people who understand. So we all, either ourselves or somebody we care about, is suffering, either with a physical illness or what they call mental illness, which is not really an illness, okay? Feeling horrible because horrible things happen to you is not an illness. It's a temporary condition and reaction. So the more bad news you go through, and I'm not talking about the stuff on the television, the more you live through, the more the happy chemicals get shut off. And over time, some people turn to unhealthy solutions to cope with that stress. So the bottom line, and we're going to get into the proof in a moment in my library in front of me and behind me. So the bottom line is we are overloading with stress. There's a condition of toxic stress overload, and it's contagious from person to person. So in 1984, my dad wrote about that in numerous ways. And it's just simple physiology. When you hear about the suffering of people you care about, then your stress goes up. And over time, what's happening is something that happened exactly in the TV show Supernatural. So Dean went to hell, and he went through hell for a long time. And when he came back, it was all suppressed into the unconscious, and he couldn't remember anything. So that's called dissociation. I've got books on that. Dissociation, the Hidden Epidemic, by a Harvard professor. So because the majority of Americans have had too many traumatic experiences. So in the TV show, there's 10 or so episodes where Dean is flashing back on what he went through, and the devil says, don't scratch that itch, because if that wall breaks, it's going to all be over. And his brother was watching him to, try to avoid that. And so I don't remember the outcome. But this is happening, and this phenomenon is leading to 95% of Americans get hypertension as they go to a senior age. And so the top expert in the world on hypertension created a new category called pre-hypertension. And so that's how they got to 95%. 95% of us are building up all this stress and not relieving it. And then the doctors give everybody drugs to try to block that adrenaline. You have so much adrenaline, we'll give you beta blockers to block adrenaline. Anybody in TV and movie industry, maybe you've heard of beta blockers if you're really nervous, it blocks adrenaline. Okay, well, giving that out to 100 million Americans when they have hypertension leads to the contagious toxic stress is going to keep spreading through the grapevine to everybody around them. So there's a book called Connected by a Harvard professor and UC San Diego professor. And it goes all into that. Another book about that right here is Contagious Emotions, written by Ronald Patel. Staying well when your loved one is depressed. So depression is contagious. He wrote this back in 1992. I met him around 20 years ago. He was at UCLA, and I talked to him, and I said, I just recently learned that my family was all broken, and there was a divorce, and I hadn't thought about it in 20 or so years because of total memory loss. And there was some violence and everything. And I said, we need healing and everything. And all he could say is, well, just disconnect from them. Just separate. So he's a psychiatrist. Anyway, he's got a lot of great ideas, but that's really not the cure, because then you hear what's going on and it still bothers you. So just divorce is not the answer. My dad tried that, and he even moved to Saudi Arabia, and it didn't disconnect everything. So disconnection is not the cure for a broken family, a broken traumatized family. And so that's what we're going to get into, the cure. What is the cure? So if 95% of Americans get hypertension, why is that? Why are we getting so much tension? So My dad had one big error. He had a few big errors in this book. Here's one on page 123. It says, ascribing unhappiness to events is a way of avoiding reality. Self-statements interpreting the events caused the unhappiness. While you have only limited control over others, you can have enormous control over your emotions. This is a skill that can be learned! Exclamation point. So that was where he was wrong. And his error on that one cost him a lot because he didn't look below all those terrible things that happen, unconsciously and dig down in there. And he thought you could just, be happy no matter if your family is broken and dysfunctional and, a lot of resentments. So he tried to ignore all that. And then at one point, the stress of everything he'd been suppressing just caused his health to go over a cliff. And I was there. And severe dementia, which I'm not blaming anybody in our family. It was a matter of toxic stress overload, which nobody had any information about because all the information was in my dad's book and nobody had read it except for me. So anyway, we all contributed to the stress in our own ways. And we all made some errors, and whatever it was is irrelevant. But what's most important is what I'm getting at here. So what I'm getting at is that there's a few pages in here that are very critical. Published in 1984, critical year. If you remember the book 1984, that there'd be this time in the future in which the government would control everything and they'd tell a lot of lies and they'd mislead a lot of people. And so 1984, it was published and endorsed by more top experts at our best universities than any book that I've ever seen on health. So one of them was Dr. I'll have to think about that. One of them was the doctor at University of Texas, and he's one of the top experts in the world, Dr. Norman Kaplan, University of Texas Health Sciences Center, Dallas Southwestern Medical School, author of Clinical Hypertension and Prevent Your Heart Attack. He's written dozens and dozens of books that are in all the medical libraries all over the world on high blood pressure. He's probably the top expert in the world. So he wrote, this book is the best presentation I know of on the effectiveness of practical use of non-drug therapies for hypertension. And he goes on. So I mention this because even back then there was a consensus that hypertension is a symptom of stress, but what's the big secret is that stress is contagious. So when you have 100 million Americans with hypertension, or more than 100 million, and they just take drugs, then that stress continues to spread and lead to 1 million deaths every year from illnesses which are entirely reversible with healthy living. So you can't fight this except by eradicating it. So you have to identify the key causes of our stress and the key cures which are not available. And that's what this project is about. So this is not just about my dad. My dad is headed towards an early grave. We're trying to reverse it, okay? We're trying to reverse it real quick, and we're trying to get a shift in the system really quick for everybody. So you have family members or friends that are headed down the wrong path. It may be it's too late for them, some of them, because you've already lost them. If you look back at the timeline of when we started, me and my dad, and when I started, I'm going to go through that in a moment. A lot of people have been lost in that time period. So that emphasizes the urgency.